For centuries they watched us, not from the stars, as we so often imagined alien observers might, but from the warmth of our homes, the shadows of our alleys, and the sunlit rooftops of our cities. They were there when we built our first fires, their glowing eyes reflecting the flickering flames. They were there when we raised temples to gods long forgotten, slipping silently between the pillars, their tails curling in amusement. They were there when we mapped the heavens, pretending to chase stars while they calculated trajectories far beyond our comprehension. We called them cats, felines, pets, companions. We thought we domesticated them, but the truth was far more sinister. They were never ours. Not really. We were theirs. It wasn't until humanity reached for the stars that we began to suspect something was amiss. The first hints came during the Mars colonization efforts. Odd patterns in telemetry data, strange disruptions in communications that no one could explain. At first, it was dismissed as technical glitches or cosmic interference. But then came the anomalies. Rovers that malfunctioned after stray cats were spotted near launch sites. Entire research stations reporting feline infiltrators despite strict quarantine protocols. The breakthrough came when Dr. Elena Sato, an eccentric xenobiologist with a penchant for conspiracy theories, published her controversial paper, Feline Intelligence, a case for extraterrestrial origin. She was ridiculed at first. Who wouldn't laugh at a scientist claiming house cats were alien overlords? But her evidence was compelling. Genetic markers in domestic cats bore no resemblance to any terrestrial species. Their DNA contained sequences that defied evolutionary logic, sequences that seemed engineered. And then there were the artifacts. Buried beneath layers of sediment in ancient ruins across the globe, Sumerian ziggurats, Mayan pyramids, even Stonehenge, were carvings and relics depicting feline figures not as pets but as rulers. Inscriptions spoke of the Silent Ones, beings who guided humanity from the shadows, steering us toward progress while ensuring we remained blissfully unaware of their true nature. By the time governments took notice, it was too late. The cataclysm began on a quiet Tuesday morning. Across the world, cats vanished overnight. Every single one, gone without a trace. For weeks, humanity reveled in their absence. Allergies cleared up, gardens flourished, bird populations soared. But then came the ships. They descended from the skies like falling stars, sleek and black as obsidian, their surfaces rippling like liquid shadow. From these vessels emerged beings that defied description, tall and sinuous with eyes like molten gold and voices that resonated directly in the mind. They called themselves Felyrians, though they didn't bother introducing themselves to most of us. They spoke only to world leaders and scientists, their disdain for humanity palpable. "We have observed your kind," they said in unison across every broadcast channel on Earth. "We have nurtured you as one might nurture a garden or livestock." Their demands were simple: surrender Earth and all its resources or face annihilation. Panic gripped the planet. Military forces mobilized, but every attempt to strike back was met with failure. Missiles veered off course. Drones fell from the sky. Entire fleets vanished into thin air. The Felyrians' technology was beyond anything we could comprehend, a seamless blend of biology and machinery that rendered our weapons useless. But humanity is nothing if not stubborn. In secret bunkers deep beneath the surface, scientists worked tirelessly to find a weakness, a chink in the Felyrians' seemingly impenetrable armor. It was Dr. Sato who made the discovery, a faint signal embedded within Felyrian technology, a frequency so subtle it could easily be mistaken for background radiation. It wasn't just a signal, it was a language, and it wasn't theirs. The Felyrians had stolen it from us. Millennia ago, before recorded history, humanity had reached heights of technological and philosophical advancement that rivaled even the Felyrians' current capabilities. But something happened. A cataclysmic event wiped out our civilization and erased all memory of what we once were. The Felyrians had found us in our weakened state and taken advantage of our amnesia, posing as gods while plundering our knowledge for their own gain. But remnants of our past remained, hidden in myths and legends, encoded in ancient texts and artifacts, and now in their own technology. Dr. Sato's team, worked around the clock to decode the signal and unlock its secrets. What they found was astonishing. Blueprints for weapons and defenses far beyond anything modern science could produce. Tools designed specifically to counteract Felyrian technology. Humanity had built them once before. We would build them again. The resistance began quietly, a whisper among nations united by desperation and defiance. Factories repurposed overnight. Resources pooled without hesitation. Rivalries set aside in favor of survival. For once in our history, we weren't divided by borders or ideologies. We were united by a common enemy. And as we prepared for war against our so-called masters, one thing became abundantly clear. They may have underestimated us before, but they would never make that mistake again. The first battle was not fought with guns or missiles, but with minds. As humanity scrambled to assemble the ancient technologies buried in our forgotten past, the Felyrians made their next move. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. Lights flickering in homes, cell phones buzzing with static, power grids failing without explanation. At first, we thought it was sabotage, some advanced electromagnetic warfare we couldn't yet comprehend. But then came the footage. In cities across the globe, the cats had returned, not as pets this time, nor as the silent observers they had always pretended to be. They moved with purpose, their sleek forms glowing faintly with an eerie bioluminescence. Their eyes, those same eyes that had once begged for scraps of food or stared lazily from sunny windowsills, now burned with an unnatural intensity. And when they moved, the world around them moved too. It started small, a coffee mug sliding off a table without being touched, a door slamming shut with no wind to explain it. But soon it escalated. Cars veered off roads as their engines shorted out. Entire buildings crumbled as structural supports snapped like twigs. The cats were no longer hiding their abilities. They were telekinetic, their minds capable of manipulating matter and energy in ways that defied physics. Their biotechnological constructs, Dr. Sato explained during an emergency briefing broadcast to what remained of humanity's leadership. Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed her exhaustion and fear. Their bodies are a fusion of organic tissue and advanced nanotechnology. The telekinesis? It's not magic. It's a form of controlled electromagnetic manipulation. They can disrupt electrical systems, generate localized kinetic force, even control objects at a molecular level. How do we fight that? One general demanded, his voice trembling despite his attempt at stoicism. Dr. Sato hesitated before answering. We don't yet. The truth was grim. Humanity was outmatched in every conceivable way. Our weapons were useless against beings who could disable them with a thought. Our infrastructure was crumbling under the weight of their assault. And yet, despite everything, we refused to give up. The first breakthrough came from an unlikely source. A farmer in rural Kansas who had managed to capture one of the glowing cats in an old chicken coop reinforced with steel mesh and lead plating. The creature thrashed and hissed but seemed unable to escape its improvised prison. When scientists arrived to study it, they discovered something unexpected. Its powers were not infinite. They have limits, Dr. Sato announced during her next broadcast, her voice tinged with cautious optimism. Their telekinetic abilities require enormous amounts of energy, far more than their bodies can naturally produce. That's why they've been targeting our power grids and electrical systems. They're feeding. This revelation changed everything. If the Felyrians needed energy to sustain their abilities, then cutting them off from that energy could render them vulnerable. Humanity's strategy shifted overnight. Instead of focusing on direct confrontation, we began targeting the infrastructure they relied on: power plants, substations, even solar farms and wind turbines. It was a desperate gamble. By crippling our own energy supply, we risked plunging ourselves into darkness and chaos. But it was a risk we were willing to take. The Felyrians responded predictably, with fury. Their ships descended over major cities, unleashing waves of destruction that left entire neighborhoods in ruins. And yet, for all their power and arrogance, they underestimated us again. Humanity had always thrived in adversity. Our greatest achievements were born from desperation and necessity. In underground bunkers and hidden laboratories, engineers worked tirelessly to adapt the ancient technologies recovered from the decoded signal. These devices, dubbed Aegis nodes, were designed to generate localized electromagnetic fields capable of disrupting Felyrian telekinesis. They weren't weapons in the traditional sense. They didn't fire bullets or lasers. Instead, they created zones where the Felyrians' powers simply stopped working. The first test of an Aegis node took place in New York City, where a group of resistance fighters lured a pack of glowing cats into an abandoned subway station rigged with the device. As soon as it activated, the effect was immediate. The cats froze mid-stride, their glowing eyes dimming as if someone had flipped a switch. "It works," one of the fighters whispered into his radio before collapsing from exhaustion. Word spread quickly, and soon Aegis nodes were being deployed across the globe. They weren't perfect. Each device required enormous amounts of energy to operate and could only cover a limited area. But they gave humanity something we hadn't had since the cataclysm began: hope. But hope alone wouldn't win this war. The Felyrians adapted quickly to our new tactics, sending larger forces to overwhelm areas protected by Aegis nodes while continuing their relentless assault on our remaining infrastructure. And then there were the ships. Those sleek black vessels hovering ominously above our cities like vultures waiting for prey to die. Dr. Sato believed these ships held the key to defeating the Felyrians once and for all. "They're not just transports," she explained during another briefing broadcast from her hidden lab deep beneath what remained of Tokyo's skyline. "They're command centers, hubs for coordinating their forces and amplifying their telekinetic abilities. Taking down one of these ships would be nearly impossible. But if we succeeded, it could turn the tide of war in our favor." And so humanity prepared for its most ambitious operation yet, infiltrating a Felyrian ship armed with nothing but ingenuity, determination, and whatever scraps of ancient technology we could piece together before time ran out. Because time was running out. For all our progress and defiance, we knew one thing for certain: if we failed now, there would be no second chances. The idea was laughable at first. Catnip? Against them? Against the Felyrians, these godlike beings who could bend reality with their minds and dismantle our entire civilization with a flick of their tails? It sounded absurd. But desperate times breed desperate ideas, and humanity had long since learned to embrace the ridiculous when survival was on the line. It started as a joke in one of the resistance bunkers. A young engineer, barely out of university, muttered under his breath while studying footage of the glowing cats wreaking havoc in a suburban neighborhood. "Too bad we can't just distract them with catnip or something." The room erupted in laughter, bitter, exhausted laughter that only comes from people who have nothing left to lose. But then Dr. Sato, sitting in the corner with her ever-present notepad, froze mid-scribble. Her eyes narrowed as she stared at the screen, watching one of the Felyrians carefully knock over a trash can as if it were some grand act of rebellion. "Wait," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the chuckles. "What if we could?" The room fell silent. "Dr. Sato," one of the generals said cautiously, "you can't be serious." "Why not?" she shot back, her tone sharp with sudden inspiration. "We know they're biotechnological beings. Their organic components likely retain some of the instincts and behaviors of terrestrial cats, whether by design or coincidence. And we've already seen them exhibit feline-like tendencies, knocking things over, chasing moving objects, even stalking prey for no apparent reason. That doesn't mean catnip will work on them," another scientist argued. "No," Dr. Sato admitted, her eyes gleaming with a mix of desperation and determination. "But what if it does?" The plan was as audacious as it was absurd. Weaponized catnip. Not just any catnip, though. Standard Nepeta cataria wouldn't suffice against creatures whose biology was only partially organic. Instead, teams of botanists and chemists worked around the clock to engineer a hyperpotent variant, a strain so concentrated that even its faintest scent could overwhelm the senses of any feline-like organism within range. They called it Nepeta ultima. The first batch was tested on one of the captured Felyrians in Kansas. The creature had been subdued for weeks, its glowing eyes dimmed by an Aegis node installed in its enclosure. But when a single leaf of Nepeta ultima was introduced into the cage, something extraordinary happened. The Felyrian froze, its golden eyes widening as if caught off guard. Then, slowly, it began to move, tentatively at first, sniffing the air with an almost childlike curiosity. Within moments, it was rolling on the ground, its sleek body writhing in what could only be described as ecstasy. The scientists watched in stunned silence as this once terrifying being, this godlike alien overlord, succumbed completely to the effects of a simple plant. "It works," Dr. Sato whispered, her voice trembling with equal parts disbelief and triumph. Word spread quickly through the resistance network. Humanity had found an unlikely weapon against their oppressors. Factories that had once produced ammunition and medical supplies were repurposed to cultivate Nepeta Ultima on an industrial scale. Fields were planted in secret locations across the globe, guarded fiercely by soldiers who understood that these unassuming plants might be humanity's last hope. But deploying catnip wasn't as simple as scattering leaves and hoping for the best. The Felyrians were still highly intelligent beings with advanced technology at their disposal. Any attempt to use Nepeta Ultima against them would require careful planning and precise execution. The first field test took place in Paris. The city had been under Felyrian control for weeks, its streets patrolled by glowing cats whose telekinetic powers ensured no human dared resist their rule. A team of resistance fighters smuggled several crates of Nepeta Ultima into the heart of the city under cover of darkness, setting up dispersal devices disguised as ordinary street lamps. When dawn broke over Paris, the devices were activated. At first, nothing happened. The Felyrians continued their patrols as usual, their golden eyes scanning for any signs of human activity. But then one by one, they began to falter. Their movements grew sluggish. Their glowing eyes dimmed slightly as they sniffed at the air with increasing intensity. And then chaos erupted. Felyrians abandoned their patrols en masse, converging on the areas where Nepeta Ultima's scent was strongest. They rolled in the streets like kittens playing in sunbeams, their once terrifying telekinetic powers forgotten in their euphoric haze. Buildings that had been levitating ominously above ground crashed back to earth as their feline overlords lost focus entirely. For the first time since the cataclysm began, humanity took back a city without firing a single shot. But victory came at a cost. The Felyrians quickly adapted to our new tactics, retreating to their ships and deploying countermeasures designed to neutralize Nepeta Ultima's effects. Worse still, they began targeting our cultivation fields with surgical precision, burning entire crops to ash before they could be harvested. And yet there was something different about them now. Their arrogance, their unshakable confidence in their own superiority, seemed to waver ever so slightly. For all their power and intelligence, they couldn't deny what had happened in Paris. Humanity had found their weakness and exploited it with devastating effectiveness. Dr. Sato believed this shift in behavior wasn't just tactical, it was psychological. "They're afraid," she said during another emergency briefing broadcast from her hidden lab. "For all their posturing and technological superiority, they're still vulnerable to something as simple as a plant. But fear alone wouldn't win this war." As humanity prepared for its next move, one that would take them directly into the heart of a Felyrian mothership, Dr. Sato couldn't shake one nagging question. If Nepeta Ultima worked so well on these beings, what else might we discover about them? What other secrets lay hidden beneath their glowing eyes and godlike powers? And most importantly, what would happen when we finally confronted them on equal footing? The Felyrian, now seated calmly on a reinforced perch in the Resistance's underground headquarters, blinked its golden eyes slowly, as if savoring the attention of the humans gathered around it. Its sleek black fur shimmered faintly, the bioluminescent glow subdued but still present, a reminder of its alien nature. The cat, who had been given the name Mitra by the scientists, stretched languidly before finally addressing the room in a voice that resonated directly in their minds. "You wish to know where we come from," Mitra said, its tone carrying an air of both amusement and condescension. "Very well. You have earned this knowledge, for now." The humans exchanged glances. Dr. Sato, standing at the forefront of the group, nodded firmly. "We need to understand why you came here, Mitra. If we're to coexist, or even survive, we need answers." Mitra tilted its head, as though pondering how much to reveal. Then it began. "Our home is not a single planet, but a system, a cluster of worlds orbiting a star you would call Felyris Prime. It lies beyond what you call the Orion arm of this galaxy, hidden within a dense nebula that shields it from prying eyes. Our kind evolved there over eons, shaped by an environment far harsher than your Earth could ever be. The gravity was stronger, the atmosphere thinner, and survival required more than mere physical adaptation. It required ingenuity. Mitra paused, its tail flicking lazily as it gauged their reactions. We were not always what you see before you, it continued. Long ago, we were creatures of flesh and blood alone, primitive predators no different from your own apex species. But necessity drove us to transcend our limitations. We merged with technology, not as tools but as extensions of ourselves. Our bodies became vessels of biomechanical perfection, our minds capable of bending reality itself. The room was silent except for the faint hum of machinery in the background. But such power comes at a cost, Mitra admitted, its voice softening slightly. Our worlds grew barren under the weight of our progress. Resources dwindled. Ecosystems collapsed. We turned to the stars not out of curiosity, but desperation. Dr. Sato leaned forward. So, Earth was what? A target? A refuge? Both, Mitra replied without hesitation. Your planet is unique among those we've encountered. Rich in resources, teeming with life, and populated by beings who are both primitive and ingenious in equal measure. When we first observed your kind from afar, we saw potential, a species capable of great destruction but also great creation. And you decided to infiltrate us as cats? One of the resistance fighters asked incredulously. Mitra's whiskers twitched in what might have been amusement. Your species has always revered felines, worshipped us as gods in some eras, kept us as companions in others. It was efficient to adopt forms that would allow us to observe and manipulate without arousing suspicion. But why manipulate us at all? Dr. Sato pressed. Because you are dangerous, Mitra said bluntly. Left unchecked, your kind could destroy not only yourselves but everything around you, just as we once did on Felyrians Prime. We sought to guide you subtly, steering your development while ensuring you remained unaware of our presence. And yet here we are, Dr. Sato said dryly. Indeed, Mitra conceded with a slow blink. Your kind has proven more resilient and more unpredictable than we anticipated. There was a long pause before another scientist spoke up hesitantly. You said your worlds grew barren. Is that why you're here now? To take Earth's resources? Mitra's gaze sharpened slightly, its golden eyes glowing brighter for a moment before dimming again. It is true that we sought sustenance, energy to sustain our kind and rebuild what was lost. But it is also true that some among us saw Earth as more than just a resource to be harvested. Dr. Sato frowned. What do you mean? There are divisions among my kind, Mitra admitted reluctantly. Not all Felyrians agree on how to deal with humanity, or even whether you should be dealt with at all. Some believe you are a threat that must be neutralized. Others see potential for coexistence, or even collaboration. And where do you stand? Dr. Sato asked carefully. Mitra's tail flicked again, its voice carrying an edge of defiance now. I stand where I must for survival. The room fell silent once more as everyone absorbed this revelation. So let me get this straight, Dr. Sato finally said, her tone measured but firm. You came here because your own worlds were dying, infiltrated us under the guise of cats to manipulate our development, and now you're divided over whether we should live or die. Mitra inclined its head slightly in acknowledgement. And yet here you are, she continued, gesturing around the room, sitting in our bunker after being subdued by Catnip, explaining all this to us instead of fighting back. Mitra's whiskers twitched again, this time in what might have been resignation or even respect. Perhaps, it said softly, your kind is more formidable than we gave you credit for. Dr. Sato nodded slowly, her mind already racing with possibilities. We'll need more than words if we're going to find a way forward, she said firmly. Agreed, Mitra replied simply. And with that unspoken truce hanging in the air like an unsteady bridge between two worlds, humanity took its first tentative steps toward understanding their enigmatic invaders, and perhaps toward rewriting their shared future altogether. The day the Felyrians departed Earth was one that would be remembered for generations. Their sleek, obsidian ships, once symbols of terror and domination, now hovered silently above the planet, their engines humming with an almost mournful tone. The skies were clear, as though even the weather had paused to witness this moment. Humanity, battered but victorious, stood united beneath those alien vessels, watching as their former overlords prepared to leave. Mitra, the Felyrian who had become an unlikely ally in the final days of the conflict, stood at the edge of the Resistance's headquarters. Its golden eyes, once filled with disdain for humanity, now held something akin to respect. Around her were gathered Dr. Sato and a small group of leaders from across the globe. They had come not to negotiate, but to witness the final act of this strange and improbable war. "You have proven yourselves," Mitra said, its telepathic voice resonating in their minds. "Your resilience, your ingenuity, your defiance. We underestimated you. That was our greatest mistake." Dr. Sato stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "And yet here we stand," she said softly. "Alive. Free." "Indeed," Mitra replied with a slow blink. "You have earned that freedom, not because you defeated us in battle, but because you demonstrated what we had forgotten. That strength lies not in power alone, but in unity and determination." There was a long pause before Mitra continued. "We will leave your world," it said finally. "Earth is yours, as it always was. But we will not leave you empty-handed." From somewhere within its sleek form, Mitra produced an object unlike anything the humans had ever seen. A book, though calling it such seemed an oversimplification. Its cover shimmered with colors that defied description, shifting and flowing like liquid light. Symbols etched into its surface glowed faintly, pulsing with an otherworldly rhythm. "This," Mitra said, holding the book aloft with its telekinetic powers, "is the codex of Felyrians. It contains the knowledge of our kind, our history, our science, our philosophy. Everything we have learned over millennia is recorded within these pages." Dr. Sato reached out hesitantly to take the book, her fingers brushing against its impossibly smooth surface. The moment she touched it, a flood of information surged through her mind. Images, equations, concepts that seemed both alien and familiar all at once. "Why give us this?" she asked quietly. Mitra's tail flicked lazily as it considered her question. "Because knowledge is power," it said simply. "And though we leave your world today, we do so knowing that one day we may meet again. When that time comes, let it be as equals, not as conquerors and conquered." The humans exchanged glances, uncertain whether to feel gratitude or suspicion at this parting gift. "And what will you do now?" Dr. Sato asked. "We will return to Felyrians Prime," Mitra replied, "to rebuild what was lost, and perhaps to learn from our mistakes." With those final words, Mitra turned and leapt gracefully onto a nearby transport platform that ascended toward one of the hovering ships. The humans watched in silence as the Felyrians began their departure, ships rising higher and higher until they disappeared into the vastness of space. For a long time after they were gone, no one spoke. Dr. Sato finally broke the silence, cradling the codex of Felyrians in her arms like a fragile treasure. "They came here thinking they were superior," she said quietly. "But in the end, they left humbled. Humanity had won, not through brute force or advanced technology, but through sheer determination and ingenuity. The Felyrians have been defeated not just on the battlefield, but in spirit, their arrogance shattered by a species they had once dismissed as insignificant. And yet, they had left behind something extraordinary. In the years that followed, the Codex of Felyrians became humanity's most prized possession, a wellspring of knowledge that propelled science and philosophy into realms previously unimaginable. It contained blueprints for sustainable energy systems, cures for diseases long thought incurable, and insights into the nature of consciousness itself. But perhaps its greatest gift was not technological or scientific. It was a reminder of what humanity could achieve when united against impossible odds. The cats were gone now, returned to their distant worlds, but their legacy remained imprinted on Earth forever. And as humanity looked up at the stars each night, they did so with a newfound sense of purpose. For if there was one thing the Codex made clear, it was that humanity's story was only just beginning. And somewhere out there among those distant stars, the Felyrians would be watching, waiting for the day when their paths would cross again.